Welcome, everybody, to Family Office Investment Landscape and the Growing Asset Class of Sports. Here we're going to explore the burgeoning trend of family offices and their diversification into sports investment. This session delves into the evolving landscape where sports, franchises, leagues, and related ventures are increasingly viewed as lucrative investment opportunities. And so hopefully we're going to give you a lot of insights today from the panel. And we have Peter Simon of Simon Sports. We have Courtney Thompson of Love. And we have Derek Gilmore of Day One Sports. And so I really want to just kind of jump into the discussion. And hi, Amber. And we're going to take questions midstream to see where the audience is, and just to kind of get a pulse from the audience. What kind of background do we have here? So how many people are in the audience that we have are entrepreneurs? All right, yay for entrepreneurs, woohoo! And how many are investors?
Oh yeah.
Oh wow, a lot of investors. Okay. And then how many people are actually athletes? All right, we've got one. Okay.
Let's go, volleyball.
Woo-hoo!
Yeah, all right.
All right, volleyball. Okay, all right, great. So, kind of hold on to some questions. Maybe in about 15 minutes, we'll start to ask some and have some engagement with the panel. So, investing in sports. One of my dear friends at Sony Ventures often tells me sports is recession-proof. I'm like, never even thought of that way. So, Peter, why did your family start a family office investing in sports? Give me a little bit of your insights into that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Simon Sports was really founded out of a shared passion my dad and I both have for the industry. Growing up, we went to games together. My dad's been an entrepreneur for over 40 years, but really, he has a lot of other businesses. So, growing up, I always knew I wanted to work in sports and wanted to be in the industry. And I didn't know what that meant, but it makes it that much more special to be with my dad and something we both love and have a shared passion for. And really, sports brings people together. Through the pandemic, and even you guys can see, even during the pandemic, I remember we were watching The Last Dance with Michael Jordan. I mean, it was a great time when everybody was going through some rough times in the world. It was a great time to bring everybody together through The Last Dance. But even as soon as COVID, got a little bit better, sports came back, and everybody, has that shared unity over sports. So we started the firm in 2022 with really two main goals. Number one, owning and operating teams, and two, investing in sports tech, media, and the future of sports. And that can mean a wide variety of things, but women's sports, sports betting, sports media as well, and kind of venturing into that. So me and my dad have had a lot of fun with it, and as Christine said, it really is recession proof because people are always going to be wanting to watch sports no matter what's going on in the world. And I don't have the exact statistic, but the most watched events global has always been sports. Have always, I think, taken over 8 out of the top 10. So it really is something that's, worldwide, people tune into sports.
And talking about investing in sports, Derek.
Yes.
You're kind of like a family office, right? You have an agency that represents athletes. Tell me a little bit more about how you decide who you're going to invest in and represent.
It's a real tricky classification when you're trying to find out who you want to go after. We always want to go after the best athletes, of course. The best athletes make the most money, but there also has to be a balance and fit. As the group has been talking a lot about NIL and how that's evolved, the expectation of athletes, young athletes, is growing, and the marketplace is exploding. So right now you're trying to find that perfect balance between people who want great representation. Today I had 5 players get cut, and no one ever hears that side. That's not the sex. We talked about one of my clients I did one of the biggest contracts in sports earlier this year, but no one talks about the other guys. So finding a balance of when a guy does get cut, him believing in you. My wife was listening to me talking about a settlement right now and making sure his health is okay, and the family trusting you. I think when you're looking for a client, you want to have someone who's going to appreciate all your efforts, someone who's going to have the opportunity to earn. The earning potential can be large, and someone who's going to be with you just as hard as you're going to be with them.
So staying with the investment theme, Courtney, you're a professional volleyball player. And of the 10 years you played professionally, 9 years you had to actually play outside of this country because no leagues existed here for professional players.
Yeah.
But yet, a nice group of folks got together and have invested roughly about $37 million in starting US-based league for volleyball. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's a pretty exciting time. I know we got one volleyball player in the back for our sport. It is
Oh,
the
and
yeah, we got a
Christy.
few. Let's go.
Christy.
All right, we got two. We broke a world record at the outdoor game in Nebraska last year with fans. Over 93,000 people came to watch that match. It's the biggest youth sport in our country for young girls. And like you said, you know, I was fortunate to compete in 2 Olympics and 10 years professionally. And every single year we have to go to other countries to compete at a high level. And so we're really excited to have an opportunity for our athletes and also the best international athletes to come here. And in our opinion, the United States hasn't seen international volleyball outside of the Olympics. And similar to the NFL or any other sport, it's quite a bit different than college. And so we're really excited about that. And I think the biggest differentiator for us and the folks that have invested in us is that our model is a little bit like a European soccer model, where we have purchased and partnered with 55 youth clubs across the country. So our whole model is this path to pro. And if you want to be the best athlete you can be, you have the resources to do that. If you want to play in college, you want to play professionally. And if you love volleyball and you now in marketing, there's also a path for that. For our youth coaches, there's a wide range of that, from parents that just love to be a part of it to folks that dream of coaching at the pro level. There's also opportunity there. And so again, for our investors, I think the holistic approach and the community that is around, we have over 300,000 people within our community, and that will likely double by the time we launch in January. So that's been really enticing for investors and meaningful for us.
And there's going to be 6 teams that start, right?
That's right. We got teams in Madison, Omaha, Atlanta, Houston, Austin, and Salt Lake. So yeah, should be fun.
And so women's sports, I mean, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that and the explosion on the stage about women's sports. How are you engaging? Are there more people coming to engage with you now? I mean, you started your career a decade ago, and you've seen this shift and change. Tell me a little bit more about your experience in that and what you've seen.
Yeah, we started League One volleyball. We pronounce it LOVE, kind of the acronym. You get used to it after a while. In 2019. And so it's been really fun for us to see this hockey stick arc of fans and sponsors that want to be a part of this, and partners that have been really meaningful. So the other unique part of LOVE is that we're supporting the whole athlete. And for us, you often, to play at the highest level, you've got to sacrifice family. And not only just because you're in another country, but also they don't really care if you want to have a kid. And if you get pregnant, it's almost like shunned upon. And overseas, it's like, well, you're not performing, now you're out. And for us, every single athlete that signs with LOVE is a full-time employee, has full benefits, even in the off season, which is pretty unheard of in our space. We're supporting moms. We want to have a place where they're taken care of in every single way, from the beginning, whether it's, hey, this is education and money to freeze your eggs if you want to keep competing, and some education around that, to you have kids and we're paying for daycare and childcare and all those things. So we don't want our athletes to have to sacrifice that.
That's phenomenal. Yeah. Derek, have you seen a shift as well representing these athletes?
Yeah, definitely. She talked about sacrificing, and when I think about the players I represent, when I first was approached by a women's softball player's family, at the time NIL wasn't around, and she was 14 years old, and I was just like, I couldn't even imagine representing someone like this. Now this woman is going to be one of the top softball players in the country. She signed with a major college, We've already gotten her several opportunities. I represent a women's basketball player. She goes to Clemson. I represent a women's basketball player with Duke. She's outstanding. She was sixth, and this is kind of funny, I don't know, sixth man of the year or sixth person of the year, but great basketball player. But yeah, the sacrifices are really strong for the athletes, and that's why we talked about a family office. You know, our agency, we want to make sure that we have everything to help supplement them to give them the most success as possible. But I think the women's athletic scene is exploding as it should because there's a need there. And I just, you know, it's great when you see people, we encourage people to get out there and support and buy tickets and buy, you know, memorabilia or whatever athletes are selling because that helps drive the sport.
Agreed, agreed. And Peter, you own, your family office owns 4 different teams, at least a portion of 4 different teams. Have you been looking at the female sports side as well for an investment?
Absolutely, yeah. We've been looking a couple teams in the NWSL. We've actually looked at another professional women's volleyball league that's already up and running. It is really a growing space. Even one of our teams, you know, in Europe, Ipswich Town, we just launched a women's team, so that's been really exciting. So it is a growing industry, and it's, you know, I really love what's happening there because I think there's a lot of opportunity. And for family offices like ours and even others, you know, it's a great, you know, investment that can be there right now and will continue to grow in value. But even more than that, it's doing the greater good for these women who, as Courtney alluded to, you know, it's really making sure that they get the recognition like the men have gotten for years, but now it's growing in a much deserved way.
Mm-hmm. And so we're talking a lot about representing the athlete and the teams that you own. And I had a neurosurgeon reach out to me a few months ago, and he has developed technology that can prevent brain injuries. He's been working on this for 40 years. He's been working with the Department of Defense in the US, Battelle, and he said, I'm thinking about taking this into the sports arena to help athletes prevent brain injuries, which is phenomenal. But it's going to take time to get that technology out there, to get it tested. What types of technologies are you looking at from deploying into utilization for the teams, into preventative technologies to ensure that the athletes have a successful, lengthy career? Peter, I'll start with you.
Yeah, no, of course. So even on the team side, I think, you know, treating injuries is very, very important. But now you're seeing a lot of teams, injury prevention is equally as important. You know, how can we, like our teams, I mean, we do sweat tests, so we understand every one of our players, how much sweat they're losing during a game and during the week, and then you create electrolyte solutions just based on their profile. You're doing a lot there. Then, you know,
So
there's
personalized medicine for the
absolutely.
athlete.
Yeah,
That's
and then there's
pretty
even
cool.
now technologies. You know, there's an investment we looked at that would be the first FDA-approved concussion therapy device to actually treat concussions, which is remarkable because if you really think about it, athletes now, they get concussions. Rest is the most important, you know, recovery method for concussions. But now, you know, if you could speed that up or even treat that, that's a really groundbreaking there. So different things like that, and then even cryotherapy and you know, acupuncture, cupping. Teams now are bringing in just you know, professionals to do those services to their athletes. So we're seeing a lot with our teams there. And then you know, for our teams, it's a competitive advantage if you're able to get a head start on recovery, on performance of your players. You know, it's an area where if you do the right things, you can definitely get a leg up on other teams and even leagues.
Are you seeing any deployment within your teams as well?
Yeah, ditto to all of that. I think the physical recovery side, certainly we want our athletes to have the best resources possible. And then for all of us, when we are anxious or really stressed, there's a huge cost to the system in that way too, in how we recover. And our ability to push the red line the next day, not only in performance, but also to have the experience we want as humans. So we're putting a huge investment in the mental health space. We've partnered with OnRise. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with them, but they've trained formerly professional athletes to kind of be the first line to talk with our athletes. Any athlete that calls within 24 hours will have support, if not sooner. And then there's a psychologist if we need to go there, and there's also a psychiatrist if it becomes more medical. So that's kind of on like the mental health space. We've also invested in the mental performance space, and I know that's a continuum for sure. For our athletes, part of the onboarding process is a one-on-one meeting with someone that can train these mental skills of how do we embrace challenge, what do we do with unknowns and change, which is really like life and sports. And so we're excited to empower our athletes with the skills to like handle all of that. So of course that's part of the onboarding, and then they have those resources ongoing as well.
And Derek, you represent these athletes, and you see the shifts and changes, and like you just said, five of your athletes have been cut today. Have you seen a shift in change in how athletes are treated over the last decade or two? And with that, do you have any suggestions on how this arena can help grow those athletes to prevent these injuries and represent them better?
Well, treated, I would say, and I'm sorry for the owner of the teams. I think teams want to benefit the teams, and players, I think, often are left to their own self-preservation. And along those lines, we really try to put them in a position, really constantly talking with them about what they're putting in their body. They're responsible for what they put in their body. They're tested for what's put in their body. And it can be very difficult. It can be a really difficult balancing act. I think one of the things I think that's kind of new on a technological side is sleep, which is not new, of course. Mm-hmm. But it's one of the areas where I'm approached quite often about trying different things for the athletes, and I have to be really selective as far as that goes. But there's a lot of new sleep products. I think the NFL, and I work with a lot of different sports, but the NFL has been a big promoter of sleep, and we're working with the sleep mattress companies, and every NFL player gets a bed. But there's two products that are really are brand new out there, not out yet. There's a company called Vital, which is a company, as I was here, I was like, wow, I should have told them to come here. And one of our Paralympic athletes who's at the Olympics right now, he's actually the captain of the Canadian team. His name is Nate Reich. And he's been trying this new product. For those of you who may be familiar with a company called Exos, the founders who started that have come up with this product called Vital, and it's kind of like a Beats headset that has a wavelength cap on your head, and it's sensory brainwaves, but basically it's helping the athletes sleep better. So that's one of a sleep trial that we're undergoing for him and some NFL guys that we're just starting with. They're going to try it when the season starts. And also a company called Pandorma, which is just really one of those mattress bed tops. And we're really trying to get that more for the collegiate athletes out there, because when they come to college the first time, two of my two athletes, I'm thinking of my two female athletes, they don't even know. They usually get a twin bed as a student athlete. And when my son was in college, we bought like 4 different mattress tops because the bed was so hard. Amazing. And this thing it's a Cadillac of bed mattresses. But I mean, really, I think that's for everyone. Even myself, I have trouble sleeping. I think just because of the stress and the competitiveness, sleep is a great advantage that we can hopefully get our athletes to take advantage of.
Our bodies actually are an investment. We need to invest in ourselves. We need to ensure.
Your body is your briefcase. I tell my athletes that all the time. Just like the businessman goes out there with his briefcase, I say your body is your briefcase. I say that all the time.
Great. I agree with you. I want to just take a moment and take a pulse of the audience to see if there's any questions along the way yet. Anyone? And I think we do have a mic with Chris there, if we have something. Christy, do you have a question? Okay. Yeah, I see you kind of talking.
Many things to ask. Maybe I'd like to ask, we see the divergence of women's and men's sports into separate brands, but women's sports are not typically running profitably as standalone teams yet. So as an investor in teams and leagues and running them, does it make sense to run both genders together, or to have the separate brand identity from the beginning, knowing that you'll have to have maybe deeper pockets to fund that along the way?
Who wants to take that, Peter?
I can take it, maybe first crack at that. So For us, it's women's sports. I believe right now is on a trajectory will eventually, it's still in its infancy, so it'll get to the point, where it'll grow, to where the men's teams are at and even the leagues. And I think media rights plays a big component in that, where like the NWSL just went through their second media rights deal and, more than, quadrupled their media rights. And I think as that goes along, the revenues for the teams will get higher, the values of the teams will grow, and then it'll eventually go to kind of where the men's are going at. But I think that's, as I alluded to earlier, it's a great opportunity for family offices to invest in women's teams, because the values are lower at this point, but they'll get to the point where men's teams are. So you do have to look at them as separate, but at the same time, I think there's the women's space is definitely much more exciting, because you do have that opportunity to get in now and to be part of that growth.
Oh, we're videotaping this, so if you can, put it.
So you're doing Ipswich together, right? Both genders under one brand?
Yeah, it's under one brand.
But then you're looking at standalone women's team investments. Like, how do you compare the difference financially?
Yeah, you mean from the women's teams like in different leagues, or just like under one umbrella? Are you saying?
Sorry, we're having a full conversation here.
No, you're good.
Like as an investor, when you're looking at the returns on those teams, do you think you will make better returns investing in a direct women's standalone team, knowing that it will be a longer path to profitability, but very valuable in the future, right?
Yes.
Or having them both under one roof, being able to share the resources across both genders, and maybe then you have the shared brand as the trade-off, right?
Yeah, I kind of like the standalone route more, because there are the complications of, even like at Ipswich, the men's team has been a long time known, and the women's team is kind of gaining in popularity, but it's still like, the team just started, so there has to be a maturation of that, versus if you invest like even in the NWSL or the WNBA, those are like their own standalone brands where, they'll grow, but they don't have the competition of the men like right there, like we have with Ipswich. So I almost think standalone is probably, more attractive, but doesn't mean the women's team at Ipswich can't continue growing in popularity. But they are kind of separate, I would say, especially in a situation like Ipswich where you do have the men's team versus the NWSL, it's just women's teams.
And I might add one thing that we're excited about that's a little bit unique, and no offense to the other sports, but there is no like W in front of what we're doing. And for women's volleyball, it's typically more exciting to watch. Fans watch it more. There's more engagement, and we don't have that direct competition with the men's league. And in most countries, that's the case. So we're excited to kind of be the alpha in our sport, and for what that means for the youth watching and everything in between.
So do you think, since you're paving the way, that there's going to be men's volleyball as a result of that?
Potentially, yeah. I think hopefully one day. We'll see about branding then. But for now, yeah, we're just trying to get this right and to be sustainable.
Volleyball in the Olympics was a lot of fun to watch.
Let's go.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. It was prime time too, so it was a lot of fun.
I'd say regarding that, I think it's important for the individual to brand themselves. I'll give you two examples. Just if you look at women's basketball right now with Caitlin Clark, I think her branding herself, being that individual, it's building that whole league. I have a women's basketball player at Duke, and they want to cross-brand. We're going to be doing a podcast, and that Duke brand of basketball, Duke, the brand itself, is very powerful. You have the men's team and you have the women's team. I thought it was important for her to stand out as an individual, even though we're going to do a joint podcast. I think you have to brand the individual, and then I think for leagues, I think it's better to sometimes stay separate, because I think if that individual is more powerful, and when I mean powerful, I mean she in that respect is just more attractive, more appealing, more energetic, and even a better player, that will help her grow her brand and the Duke women's basketball team. And that would be the same for professional leagues, in my opinion.
Yeah.
As we're talking about brands, there's been a huge shift over the last few years with name, image, and likeness. And how have you seen, well, since we're on you right now, how have you seen this shifted for the athletes that you've represented? I mean, it was a huge shift when it started into the collegiate level. When I was at University of California, I saw that we had lots of conversations and that huge dynamical shift in how now they can monetize their brand.
This is just a constant evolving situation. Literally from when it started a couple years ago, the rules have constantly changed throughout the years for the universities, for the students, for the families. It's gone from you can't give anything to anyone to I did a deal for a family for $300,000 to a student athlete getting that type of money.
And that's huge.
We got to get you over to volleyball, sir.
I know. I told her, I said, we got to find the right. I believe that. It just, there's supply and demand, and that's what it is. But, the old school in me, sometimes I just, I don't know if it's the right thing. I understand the importance for the athletes to get paid and for the opportunity with name, image, and likeness, because that's important for them to be represented and to get something. And I think it started because of the inequities of players and coaches and what they were getting, and then families trying to survive. So there's a lot of schools that are doing it right. There's a school in the Big Ten that's giving families money when they come to the games to make sure that they're able to get to the games. And there's players that people don't know that are doing. I have two players that I represent, two big time programs that are doing charity events and giving money back to youth. So those are some of the good sides to it. We just hope that it doesn't become a greed type of situation, and that the student athletes are still able to get their degree, and that becomes a precedent. I think that's very important. But regarding name, image, and likeness, I think having the opportunity to brand themselves, especially, and really female athletes do it, in my opinion, 10 times better. Just to the two female athletes out here, one of the things that's hurt athletes is that in the name, image, and likeness, brands, I've talked to several brands, when they do deals with the companies, and then the athletes don't post or don't utilize that product. So they do a deal with Foot Locker, and then they're not, promoting Foot Locker. That really hurts. That's hurt women's sports and hurt a lot of different individual athletes. So I think and then making sure that consumers out here, that you guys actually support those sports. So going to the games, watching the games, buying what they're promoting, and then the athlete themselves, it's important for them to make sure that they're using that product and promoting that product. I think and I had a young lady she didn't make the Olympic team, a diver, and Adidas wanted her to do this certain ad, and she just didn't like the product. If you don't believe in it, don't tell them no, change it. You have that, they have that power,
One thing on the team side, NIL, we own a hockey team in Canada in the CHL, which is a junior league, and there's a lot of talk right now between the NCAA and CHL players, because CHL players for years have been banned from playing in the NCAA because they're considered professionals. Well, now with the NIL, college players getting paid, it might change the landscape on crossing over between the two leagues, and I think it would be great, because I think kids, like if they play for our team in Canada and they don't have a good experience, they should be able to go play for an NCAA team, and vice versa. Whatever works best for the student and whatever works best for the kid. But previously that wasn't the case. So there's a lot of talk on when those rules will change, but it all spurs from the NIL.
And have you seen a shift and change in how the dynamics of how it lifts your teams up for certain players that leverage that capability?
Yes. Well, I'll give you examples. So there's been first overall picks born and raised in Canada, and rather than coming and playing in the CHL, they wanted to play for Boston University or some team in the Midwest. But if they played in the CHL, they would be banned. Well, now you could get that same kid who comes and plays for his local team when he's 16 or 17, then plays in the NCAA. So it could benefit us, because a kid that we never would have played, in Halifax or some of these bigger markets in the Canadian Hockey League could then play for you for a year or two and then go play in the NCAA. So I think it works both ways, and I think it benefits the NCAA as well, because right now it's a very competitive environment. where it's either one or the other, because you're banned if you play in the CHL or if you play in the NCAA from the two leagues. So now it would really give the kids the opportunity where they don't have to make such a crucial decision at a young age and then be banned from playing in another league. So there's a lot of talk on that, but it would benefit the CHL, but I think it could also benefit the NCAA as well.
I agree. Courtney, so you've seen this shift over the
Yeah.
years of playing.
Bummed I missed it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great deal. Yeah.
Yeah. So how are your teams leveraging it, and what are the positives and negatives that you've seen?
Yeah, well, we're really trying, if it's good for the athlete and if it's good for volleyball, it's good for us. So it's really exciting for a lot of our players that are seeing that in college. I think we probably are impacted the most at the contracts that we're looking to sign. And we're, wanting to be this high-level product. In year one, I think we'll be top 3 league in the world, which is pretty, better than we expected kind of going in. And yet the college players now, a handful of them are making quite a bit of money, which is awesome. But at some point that will affect the contracts. So we're working on that. I also think back to the branding idea, and you mentioned in the NIL conversation, for women's sports, it seems to me there's a big shift too of like, it used to just be shrink it and pink it. Like even how are we doing uniforms? Who are our partners? Who are our streaming partners? How are we presenting this brand? What does the brand stand for? And we're really trying to challenge almost every aspect of professional sports to be the next major league and to hopefully do it in a way that's never been done, where there's the edginess of wanting to be the best in the world and having the resources to do that, and also doing it in a way that's really connected to community. And excuse my French, but I used to have a coach that would say, hey, it's the journey, not the destination. Like, how many of you guys have heard that before, right? And I was the kid in the back going, bullshit, you've probably never won anything in your life. Like, I'm trying to win this thing. And all of us get to a point where you're an Olympic, you're somewhere you dreamed of being, and you go, and now what? And so we want our athletes to make all the money in the world. I'm looking at you two right now. And we also want them to be really connected to communities and a part of something that's bigger than them. And I think that's where love and where we're trying to take professional sports, and it's a cool time to do that.
So talking about communities, we were having a chat earlier today about the youth communities. A lot of kids want to play sports. Doesn't mean they're going to make it to the major leagues and maybe be part of a team, but it's all about a sense of community. And so what across the row here are you guys working to help build that out?
So I like specifically just looking at our team. So, Ipswich, but even in soccer, a lot of teams will have the model where they have developmental academies where they'll have kids from a young age that will play for the team growing up, and then it'll kind of be like a pipeline system. So you see a lot of that in soccer, and it's kind of even growing here in the States. I know like Josh Harris and David Blitzer and their whole group, they started a new venture just looking at youth sports and kind of consolidating that whole space. So there's definitely a lot of development there, and even in hockey and some other spaces, you're seeing a consolidation behind it, and I think it's great because I think even growing up, like depending on where you are, I grew up in Michigan, so depending on where you are in Michigan, of course you have the different tiers, and even one football team is in one division, another team, but there's no consolidation of all of it, and I think kids should have more opportunity where if there's a superstar who's playing for my high school, I want to make sure that if he's really that good, he should have the spotlight, he should have the opportunity to get seen. So really making sure that we're doing a good job at the youth sports level of giving kids the best opportunities and also letting them blossom through there and get the attention that they deserve.
And Derek, you've been working with a lot of youth teams as well.
Yeah. My wife and I actually had a little football camp, First Steps Football Academy, for years, and it was our way of giving back. And now the NFL, with the NFL flag system, is just exploding. And I love seeing, boys and little girls getting a chance to play all the way up to women and boy and men playing in flag football. And I think flag has become one of the things that they're pushing at the youth level. When I say youth, anything in high school and even below. But I think it's fantastic to, when you look at other countries, the opportunities, we were talking about that, really globally, that the youth level is where it's going to start. And I think there's a fear right now with injuries in the NFL, and that's why the flag movement has really exploded. And talking about preventing concussions, and I don't know, it's a collision sport.
It is.
And really with women's soccer, a lot of women, the most injuries come from concussions in women's sports because the neck, that's where the injuries come from. So I don't know how you're going to really prevent those concussions, but I think getting them involved at a young age, getting the families comfortable at a young age, that's the way to help grow the sport, get people familiar, knowing the questions asked so that they're educated, and I think all sports can kind of evolve from there.
And Courtney, you're all about that.
Yeah, I've already talked a lot about it, but our whole model is really, connecting our youth athletes with our pro athletes, also the coaching staffs. I mean, you can imagine being like a basketball player who's 10 practicing right next to, Steph Curry. How exciting. And our model is our pro athletes will be training in these same gyms, the same facilities. There's a lot of activations around connecting our pros with our youth athletes, and just to drop that seed of hope and like what's possible. And wow, she looks like me. She's from where I'm from. She talks like me. Like, that's amazing. I want to be a part of this. And again, not everyone's going to be pro, but even at the pro level, if we can support the whole athlete, and we're teaching financial literacy, we're teaching all of the, women's health, all of these other things it's a holistic approach to this thing that we're pretty excited about.
And I think one thing just to add on to that is, especially with kids growing up these days, social media has really exploded, and like even LeBron, when he was growing up, his cover of Sports Illustrated, but these superstar athletes from a young age, social media has taken on a whole new level. So insulating them from that, and then the mental health component of children and even just pro athletes, right away, like any resource that they need, especially with our teams, but even at the league level, having hotlines, but even any help that we can support the athlete with, because that's so important. And mental health, now is, truthfully, the physical aspect is one component, but the mental health is almost, equally as important, of course.
And it's tough to shield the athlete from that, from
from
the complaints if you're either, love the team if they're winning, or you don't like the team if they're not. And how do you maintain that for the athlete to kind of filter through of like, oh my gosh, you're horrible, you played horribly, but that doesn't define you. And I think mental health is really an important component to ensuring the longevity of these athletes.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's one of those things, it's that's growing as well. I mean, there's a lot more resources now than even just a couple of years ago, but it'll continue growing. But I think, the minute you see something, and the minute, an athlete needs help and needs a resource, making sure that you drop everything and you just make sure that the athlete gets what they need, the attention that they need. But more than that is it's before a big game. Derek can probably speak to it more closely in terms of the athlete's preparation, but probably staying away from social media and making sure that you're very focused, because there's a lot going on, a lot set out there. And I've learned, even being involved with teams, that most of it is not true. So it's very important that whatever was being written about you, it's something that you just have to be very careful about.
Because people are looking for clickbait, right? And elevating themselves if it might not have anything to do with the athlete.
I had a dad one time who called me up and said, "Did you see what they said about?" I represented both his sons, and I said to him, I said, "Hey, they call it fans because it's short for fanatical, and you can't read everything. And nowadays, athletes, especially with Instagram and the social media and them tweeting or posting during talk between the coaches, it's sometimes a little bit too interactive, but like you said, I think you need to kind of have a separation. That's the coach side of me in the back. Separation of church and state. Yeah. But I would really love to hear from some of the audience members and the investors what they are looking to invest in. What drew them to this talk, and from that perspective, kind of from a sports side, what would they want to invest in? How does that look?
Anybody want to
Put some pressure on you guys.
answer that? We got 5 minutes left. Yeah, okay.
Thank you so much for the great conversation. I think you guys brought up great points in terms of prioritizing education. Derek, you had mentioned that, and of course, financial literacy. It's not a secret that a lot of professional athletes struggle with that, and a lot of times end up, bankrupt at the end of the day. So it's almost like this existential question when it comes to NIL. How are you making? Let's say, as an example, and I believe I read this in the New York Times, that perhaps private equity or some other alternative investment product developer could get involved in the NIL space. So, how is that going to be prioritized, making sure that education is a focus and this isn't turning into more, let's get a great return on this, and not thinking about the athlete. And kind of the other part of it, it's more of a comment than a question, not growing up with social media, just making sure that building your brand doesn't supersede things like education and your mental fitness. So how do you kind of like square those circles?
Great question.
I mean, I would think if you're the investor or awarding a scholarship, you control the purse strings. So from a university standpoint, a lot of people have this misnomer regarding NIL that this agent is going to go out and get this monster deal. No, the deals are coming through the school, through a fund of sorts. And as an investor, they can turn around and say, these are the restrictions, these are the guidelines, this is what needs to happen. And I would love for them to do that. And some people, now I haven't heard of this, but yeah, that would be great. Hey, guess what? You have to keep a GPA of X. That would be smart. But I haven't seen it, probably because it's not a priority. But that would be great. I think that's something they could definitely do regarding NIL and the investment. But clearly the investor controls. For those of you, my wife and I give 2 scholarships out, really 4, but we have the constraints that we want for giving, and that's the universities have to implement that. So
I also would say governance is very important as well, like clear outlines of rules and making sure that there is a vetting process behind companies that are being formed for NIL purposes, and understanding more exactly what the purpose is and even who the people are behind it, because I think that's very important. So I just think, of course, governance, because it is like as Derek said, it's a rapidly evolving space and there's a lot going on, but there needs to be some rules set. And even this, even today, I think the NFL is voting on private equity owning parts of teams, and up to 10%. I think and only pre-approved firms are allowed at the first crack. So that's making sure that the right people are getting involved, the right firms are getting involved, and there is governance behind it, so it doesn't balloon out of control where people are behind it for the wrong reasons.
I think we have time for one more question.
Closing this down.
Right
So, Jennifer, I actually close to Illinois with Hambly.
Oh yeah, right on.
Yeah, so I remember watching you in the 2005 championships.
Yeah.
So I have a group movement platform, and so what we do is we help youth teams, college teams, agents manage logistics, because what we tend to see is League App, Team Snap, they aren't managing the KSF tournaments. So I'd say for Courtney, what could I do to be able to chat with you with Love Volleyball? Because we see such a great intersection with youth volleyball. These parents go to these tournaments, they're just using WhatsApp and getting really frustrated with the medium, and we solve all those problems. So I'd love to see if we could connect, or anyone with the agents, because I know when you have to manage your clients' schedules, usually it's email or text message, and they consistently are asking you, well, where do we still go? And so that's kind of what we do, is we manage all the logistical flights, hotels, activities, everything in one place, so it's easier and accessible for everyone.
Amazing. Yeah, let's chat when we wrap here.
Anybody else?
We got one more here. Thanks, Chris.
Sorry in advance, ex-front office soccer guy. So one thing that's not really been mentioned is the pay-to-play model, right? If you think about American sports overall, it's about getting more money out of youth for them to pay at a higher level for them to be able to participate, right? Different than Ipswich Town, where you have money being invested back down from sponsorship all the way down to the youth level. That being said, what are you all doing to address that in regards to the pay-to-play model? How do we fix that short and long term to make sure we get the right athletes into the programs, get every kid an opportunity? Because like everybody from Hamilton County up in here, knows the soccer programs in this area. If you don't have a lot of money, you fall off the radar, right? So getting to an academy or getting to an area where kids can get recognized, even at the lower economical levels, what's being addressed to flip the inverse and what you can do now to get to where you want to be in the future, to get the best athletes potentially in your clubs.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, even before, paying to play or getting involved in an academy, I think in general sports, like bringing down some of the cost for some sports to play, because I think at a young age, even before, when the kid is just, like if you want to play hockey, you got to buy pads and you got to buy all this stuff, but it's a very expensive sport to play versus basketball. I mean, you need a basketball and gym shoes. Same thing with soccer. So like some of the sports, bringing down the cost just from the get-go to be able to play the sport. And then the pay to play, I think it goes back to the whole, the rules on governance and everything. I mean, we've come across leagues, not looking to invest in, but even just, you look at the leagues that are pay to play, there's a lot more going on there than like, the more professional leagues and all that. So I think, it's number one, bringing down the cost to even play the sport to start off. And number two, it's looking at those pay to play leagues and really making sure that whether it's funding that they need or something, just, understanding that, some of this, some of the odd stuff that happens with those leagues, that those are then, taken care of in the right way. But at the end of the day, it comes down to funding for those leagues, where I don't believe if a kid wants to play a sport, I don't believe it should come down to, the dollars and how much they have to spend to play that sport. I think they should be given the opportunity to.
Yeah, I love that question, and it's a much bigger conversation, but for us, I think it's pretty unique in volleyball, at least, to have kind of a single entity owning 55 clubs, and so we're able to reduce a lot of the costs and partnerships and all these things. And again, most of our investors have been really excited about supporting the club space. And so for us, we started a foundation to address that. It's a huge issue in volleyball that we feel pretty strongly about. So yes to that. And for some clarity, our pro league is not supported by anything coming from club. They're very separate in that way, and we're hoping that we can add value this way rather than that way. So yeah, great question.
So that's all the time we have. Please join me in thanking Peter, Courtney, and Derek for sharing their amazing experience and insights. And I think, we'll be off to the side if there's any more questions you want to ask the panelists. So thank you again.